5Options show, where every week Marta and Anna abandon their 5 children, 2 partners and 1 cat to make a show especially for you. An artist, a challenge, a bullshit, a wisdom and a surprise. Tune in and feel the magic of 5.
Hello everyone, this is Marta.
And this is Anna.
And this is You've Got 5 Options show.
Live on air. So if you are listening to us right now on the radio, we are live, and you can actually interact with us if you wish. Marta, how people can interact with us? We have a Facebook page.
We have a Facebook page, so you can go on Facebook and you can find You've Got 5 Options. Mm-hmm. And you can write to us because we should have a phone here, but I believe that it's kind of like missing.
It disappeared.
But next time, let's try to get it so that people can actually also call us. It has happened before that people called us.
Yes, but we definitely have received messages way more often than the phone calls. So now I can see that Marta is opening her Facebook. So we will have our Messenger on our Facebook page open. So if you are listening to us and you have your mobile or computer on hand, you can write to us in a real time. And we will interact with your comment or question. Because today we have a very special show. Today we are only answering questions and representing opinions of our listeners.
And if you are totally shocked because you were waiting for the part 2 of our 5 challenges to deal with in those crazy corona times, well, we have decided to put that on pause. And the main reason is because we received another challenge and we received a lot of questions which we wanted to address first. And then we will come back to that other thing.
We will come back to it. It's just we thought that maybe it's time to do something a little bit more interactive. And oh my God, I have burped live on air. Fantastic. So now you have a proof. This is live on air. We are not editing this out. We have actually received 8 questions from our listeners. I'm not sure how many of them we will be able to answer. And we have also received 1 message from a listener in USA, Chicago. And she basically gave her opinion. She have asked a question while also giving her opinion. So there will be a question there as well, but there will be a lot of feelings that she and her family and the close one have about the whole situation in the United States. I believe it's quite interesting to hear it, especially that we don't really have a way to communicate with each other or visit different places. And, we can only see what's happening in US from the news. She's from Chicago, so this is not, for instance, New York, that seems to be the epicenter of the disease. So maybe we can see something from another part of US. How does it sound, Marta?
It sounds interesting. And at the same time, I wanted to say that we have received the first message on our Facebook page. So I wanted to say, David Villanueva, thank you so much for writing to us. So far we have received Ola. So Ola back at ya. And if you would like to write something more than that, we will be excited and happy to share it with all our listeners.
Yes. So as you can see, the messenger is working and my boyfriend is writing. This is not only for my boyfriend, okay? He could also text me normally. So, but really, it is working. So please write to us if you see anything interesting. But I believe that we will just jump into the first question.
I will just quote David Villanueva, who wrote, ha, 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 ha. That's as much as we get of interaction with our listeners. But, that's really amazing if your life partner is listening to us live right now on the radio. The radio is working. The messenger is working. I think we are on fire. Let's jump into the questions.
So as I mentioned, we received 8 different questions, and they actually are about very different topics. And I will start with something how to say, personal, about private lives. So we have a question from our listener in Hamburg, and she's asking, how can recent singles get used to and cope with the sudden loneliness that is super drastic, no social contact at all, and really extended due to the coronavirus? So I could assume that it can be tough if you have just went through a breakup and you are a recent single, as our listener is mentioning here in a question. And now, you are locked home alone. And how can you cope with that sudden loneliness? It's a tough question.
It is a tough question. I right away remember that in Denmark, that question was asked publicly.
Really?
Yes, and the Minister of, and now I don't remember if it was the Minister of Health or from that Serum Institute, I don't know, remember which one, but anyway, there was a public official, statement from the officials in Denmark saying that yes, sex is healthy. And there should be no way, to avoid it. I mean, that we shouldn't avoid it. So basically, I don't know if that answers the question.
I really believe that all you wanted was to put that information in the show somehow. Well, but yes, I have read the same statement. I think it was a Minister of Health, actually, who said that sex is healthy and we shouldn't restrain ourselves. However, I would like to learn about the logistics from the Mr. Minister.
There were logistics displayed also, how to stay in the proper distance, like don't do handshakes and stuff, as you are doing it, and what kind of positions could allow you being in a proper distance as well. So
but
people
I think
can be creative.
Very, very creative. You should see what Denis has showed us. That opened a whole new world of sex activities. But I would say that sex is definitely healthy. The problem is that in these times it's probably difficult to meet someone to have sex with to begin with, unless we are talking about did the minister meant masturbating or the actual?
No, the actual sex. Okay, well, we came up with one angle of it, of course, right? I mean, sex is one thing that you might be missing when you are a recent single. There are, of course, other things that are just as important. And of course, the loneliness, the general, you are dealing with the heartbreak and it's a difficult emotional time. And of course, one thing is make sure that you get the emotional support. When you are in this kind of situation. Anyone who is in any difficult mental or emotional situation right now is very vulnerable when it comes to the times where we are not allowed to meet freely. Maybe we cannot even go and see our therapist, whatever. I mean, many people are vulnerable at this point of time. So definitely make sure that you reach out and get emotional support. And I have also been seeing online people talking about it. How do you date in those times? And people actually started dating online, meaning that the Zoom must be getting so rich right now. People are getting coffee meetings on Zoom. Luckily we are already living in times where a lot of interaction is happening online anyway. I mean, no one in those times have any problem anymore by meeting people to date online. I mean, no one is, of course, an overstatement. I'm sure there are some people, but it's totally normal now to meet people through dating sites, through dating applications and so on. So that's good news, because if we needed to come up with that right now, that would be difficult. But we already know that. So you can start dating someone online.
Yeah, I believe that we have covered, the sex and the dating part definitely very well. I completely agree with you, Marta. I believe that online dating was extremely popular way to meet someone before coronavirus. This is how I met that guy who is writing to us on Messenger, on Tinder. And I think that currently there is no stigma or shame in that. Another angle that I would like to talk about here is, when you are a recent single, dear listener, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be dating again, right? You might need some time for yourself. And I believe that for some people, the lockdown might be a blessing in disguise. Because many people, after breakups, they throw themselves into coping mechanisms that are not necessarily the most healthy. So people start to party, go out, or endure or immerse themselves with work just to forget, or, for instance, start dating straight away someone new, right? And it's very easy to try to basically try to use activities to forget about your heartache when everything is around you open and you have so many different ways to do it. This situation might actually force you to do some inner work and inner examination of what went wrong with your relationship. I think we have this topic discussed already so many times on this show, and we actually had one show dedicated solely to trying to taking your time and self-analyzing what went wrong with my relationship. I have myself, before I met my current and hopefully the last life partner, I have myself taken at least half a year of vacation from the dating and relationship market. I was not engaging in any flirting conversation, nothing. I was basically trying to get to some sort of inner realization of what was happening with my relationships and with me throughout this time. Am I choosing my partners because of some biases? Or what do I really want from the relationship? Who should I really seek for? What would be my bias or my baggage that I would like to or would have to solve? And that required actually quite of a emotional lockdown from everything else, not to get distracted by going out to the bar or dating or working too much to forget about someone, but actually face your disappointment and heartache and try to learn from it. So the next relationship, I will choose more consciously, and I will know what I want, and I will know what are my shortcomings, and I would be able to fix them. So that can be for some people a blessing in disguise. However, if you feel really down and really shitty, it is important to reach out, as Marta said. You can do both. You can do the healing or exercising or realization. I will actually link some of the materials in the show notes to this episode. What can you do? How can you do those exercises for yourself? And remember to keep in touch with people if it's really tough, because people now have time to talk online. It's not the same. I understand there is a certain feeling and vibration that is being created when humans are together. That's why we like to be in groups. That's why we don't like to be lonely and alone for a longer period of time. So reach out to people, but try to use this time productively. Try to be like, okay, I'm locked down with myself after the breakup. Okay, let's try to design my love life from now. Let's see what went wrong with all my relationships in the past. Let's see what I truly want, who I'm really looking for. And maybe that would be the best thing that happens to you. Okay, am I sounding now like a cuckoo person?
No, absolutely not. And of course, we took the challenge a little bit lightly at the beginning, with the first, so to speak, comments from my side. Also, please take under consideration that last time I was single was very, very, very long time ago. I don't even remember how it was. But maybe you, Dennis, have any insights, anything to share with our listeners on that topic?
Yeah.
Regarding?
How the recent singles can cope in this situation, when you are basically separated from people and you are sitting home alone with a heartache.
Pornhub.
And that is yet another
That's a
relevant.
completely different take.
That's a completely different take.
No, I really don't have anything to add to that.
Okay. So you would tend to agree with us?
I think everything you said made sense.
I like that answer, Dennis.
Now that we are at that question, we do have a question from David Villanueva to you, Dennis. How is your head?
A bit sore.
A bit sore.
A
Okay.
bit sore. Yes.
Yes.
That's the answer.
But okay.
But okay.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that matters the most. Okay, so that was our question. So that was the first question from our listener in Germany, Hamburg. And now we will jump to a question from someone from Denmark. So the question is, speaking of the new normal, one of its possibilities would be more of working from home. What would productivity look like working from home? Do you ladies think it will increase productivity or decrease it? So I believe that that the listener is asking how to be productive when you are working from home.
So,
And will it decrease it or increase it? Yeah.
but that's, I mean, you cannot say if it will increase it or decrease it, because to one person it will decrease it and to another person it will increase it. So it so depends on your personal, makeup, on your personal situation, on your conditions at home versus at work. I mean, that I have to answer to this question. I cannot give one straightforward answer whether it will increase or decrease productivity. What I know is that you have to take under consideration working from home with kids or without kids.
Totally.
Is a completely different story and a completely different set of challenges that you might have. Do you actually have a space for work? That's another, condition that can determine whether your productivity gets increased or decreased, right? So I can tell you from my personal experience that for me, working from home can do both. So when I was still working in my full-time job, I was sometimes going home so that I can be more productive. Because people at work were coming all the time, they were talking to me, they were asking me questions, they were disturbing, they were talking on the phone, 10 of them at the same time, and my productivity was some days very low. And I was actually going home to be able to do my work in peace, and I was extremely much more productive. There were days when I needed to work from home. For example, I had 2 out of my 3 kids sick, and then productivity when working from home was decreased. I was not able to do 8 full hours of work from home for sure when I needed to attend to kids being ill as well. So that can be either way. What I can say that in those situations in the situation we are right now, many people have to work from home. So how can you actually increase that productivity? So first of all, I would say the most important thing I find is prioritizing. I think that you really have to sit down and look at your priorities. What is absolutely need to have and what is nice to have. That prioritization and taking care of the things that need to get done is absolutely the most vital. And also, if you are a parent who is at home with kids, what's your priority when it comes to work and your priority when it comes to your family? Because that's a really big question. What's your priority in those times? Do you need to talk to your boss and say, look, it's not realistic at all for me to work 8 hours a day because I am with 5 kids at home and 4 of them are on homeschooling and need some support, or whatever is the situation. Maybe it's absolutely not an option for you to work full-time from home. And how important it is for you to be full on at work and how important it is to be able to actually support your children in that time. So your prioritization first in relation to what are your values, what's the priority for you in regards to your values, and what's the priority in tasks. And second is the boundaries. very, very clear boundaries, especially if there are other people. And when there are children, if you have very small children, their ability to respect boundaries is very low. With bigger kids is bigger. But sometimes it's also a matter when you are living with other adults. They might need to use the same space as you are using. They might be loud. They might be disturbing you. So having the human skill of sitting down together and agreeing on those boundaries, whether it's with other family members or with, whomever you need to do that, whether it's your boss with whom you need to work on boundaries. That's the second thing that I find the most important. And the third thing that I find the most important, and I actually don't know if it shouldn't be, the first one is just, have your own back in it.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure that you are in a good well-being, and if it is too difficult, if it is too overwhelming, if you are so tired, overwhelmed, and that it's difficult to get anything done and you have been working 12 hours today already, take a freaking day off.
Yeah, I like all of your remarks, Marta. And following on them, I will play a little bit of a role of a future forecaster, trend identifier, whatever that person shall be called, because I will try to make it a little bit more general. If I would have to look at the trends, you have pointed out very well that this is many times individual thing. It depends on many different factors in a life of a person. But if we would look at the working from home as the new way of working in general, then I believe that it could happen that the productivity would decrease. The very obvious reason is what have Marta just mentioned. Most of people who are now forced to work from home are also home with their children. And I'm sorry to say that, but unless you will work in the night when kids are sleeping, it will be probably quite difficult for you to be productive when you have a child at home that you have to help with homeschooling, prepare lunch, and other things like this. Plus, we have to take in consideration that productivity is very much linked with your overall well-being. So now if you are having children home and you are also concerned or scared about the pandemic, work might not be even your first or second or third priority. You might actually try to work, but you might feel very distracted by, what is happening. And many people don't even have a right mindset to focus into doing their regular job because they don't find it that important, right? But let's say that we will go a little bit further in time and we will say, okay, so we have the new normal, and for different reasons we have to work from home, let's say half of the time, because maybe before we were traveling to work and now this is limited. Let's say that the kids, because many people don't have kids, we are also talking about young millennials right now. So now basically you have to work in a new way. And here the trick, I believe, that many managers perceive as trick is lack of control over the employee, right? Because the fact that you are coming to a building and you are sitting in the office gives an impression of having more control over the employee, his time and the things he's doing. That impression, I believe, in some sense is a false impression, because as I worked in corporation for many years, I can definitely tell you that there are ways of not being productive and yet being present in the office. So I believe, many of us are still very attached to this idea of if a person is on the location and I can see him or her sitting at the desk, I can make sure that that person is working, which pretty much is a very false thing to think, because that person can do a lot of, you cannot babysit an employee for 8 hours, right? So that is, I believe, somehow probably false premise. But this is how we were taught for decades, that this is how it works. People go to the office, we can control them, we can control when they clip their card, when they came in, where they came out, how long they ate. It's all about control.
For centuries, it's been like that.
Probably for centuries, since the Industrial Revolution. So many managers have this setup in their heads. They think that in order to have people working productively, they have to be able to control them. That is not necessarily true, but the problem is that many of us feel the same as employees. So we think that if no one is controlling me, I will probably kind of like sleep. All just on a basis of contradiction in my head. Now there is no control, I won't do anything. You know, like a kid who is like, mommy is not looking, I will do naughty things. But it cannot go on like this forever. So I guess people will have to learn how to operate in this new thing. And then I think there is trillions, as Marta said before privately to me, articles and tips on how to stay productive. You have to build your own routine, that you are waking up maybe at the same amount of time and you are setting your priorities and doing this and that and that. It's possible, but this is a change. And it's a change for a lot of people at the same time. When we go through a change, especially in business and management, it will take some time for people to adjust and catch up. But I believe that in a long term, this can definitely increase productivity if we are learning this right. That's my opinion. But I believe the first weeks or months could be quite chaotic. There is a silence.
No, I'm just hoping to be allowed to elaborate on that.
Of course you are.
I am struggling to remember which newspaper I read the article in. Mm-hmm. But it was an article, I'm trying to summarize it. It was a big piece. And to summarize it, the writer, he wrote about a possibility for a change in paradigm regarding the way we work. Because you mentioned the 8 hours. Can I work 8 hours? And the article suggests that maybe it's an old way of looking at it, that we have to work 8 hours. Because really what we need to do is to do the task at hand. And if we can solve the task at hand in 6 hours, then why feel bad about the 2 hours? Why struggle to find something else to do in the 2 hours? And so the whole article was about, they've made a bunch of interviews. It was in Denmark, and They interviewed a lot of people who were working from home. Of course, not everybody can work from home. Some industries, you just can't do them at home. But of course, they focused on the people who are working at home now and doing the exact same thing as they were doing on a regular basis, because they could do it on the computer, on the internet, and they can communicate, and they had meetings online and all this stuff. And what they found out from, I don't know how many people they interviewed, but generally, everybody spent less time doing the exact same amount of work. So they did practically as if there was no lockdown. The company had their task solved. Everything was like normal, except they spent less time doing it, and from home. And so the whole piece was about, can we free up a lot more time for people to be at home? Nobody needs to be cut in their paycheck, and it's still called full-time work, because there's so many tasks, but if you can do them in 4 hours or 6 hours, and hey, kudos, go to the forest with your kids if they're home. And maybe it's a chance for a complete revision of how work is done.
I have to say I completely agree, and I believe that a lot of premises on which the current managerial styles are built, the traditional ones, are very old, and they don't fit to the modern times, in my opinion. And Marta, you have switched from corporation to being a self-employed person. You have built yourself a routine in the end of the day, right?
So what I want to say is that I had pretty good flexibility at work, and I've had a setup. I had a great manager, and the thing was for me to deliver the tasks. And there is a learning curve for the same tasks. At the beginning of my work, I was taking many more hours than at the end of my work. I could solve the same task probably in 25% of the time that I used when I was learning to solve that task. My tasks were delivered in very high quality because I was experienced already, and I had a pretty good setup with my manager.